Ciao.
Good to have you back. Good to have you here for the first time.
Good to be here.
In this new Tuscan location. So, for those who don't know, Liz has been teaching yoga in Florida and elsewhere. She's a student of ours. She has taken the training with us years ago, 4 years ago, was it? 4.5?
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
Four.
And then started her own teaching career, and quite successfully so. So we thought we'd take the opportunity and ask her a few questions about how it went, so that we all get a better impression of what it's like to start as a new teacher. So yes, tell us a little bit about your experience. How was it to get started? What were the steps you took?
I think I was fortunate because I was already established as a teacher in town. I taught meditation and Zumba.
Wow.
Yep. From Zumba to yoga was quite a journey. So that helped a lot, and I was well connected in the community. But coming back from being 5 weeks in an ashram in training in a very contemplative place and state, actually was quite difficult at first. The re-entry process took a while. And so I started teaching community-based classes, and that's where I really felt called, was to teach financially accessible yoga and physically accessible yoga so that people of all body sizes could attend class. And at the time, I had sort of an interesting relationship with studio-based yoga. So I started in the community, which I think actually was a benefit, and I often recommend to new teachers to start in the community, have a class in a park, have a class in a city center, so that you can get people from a variety of walks of life to come to class, come together in a space to really experience the power of this practice, but then also to fine-tune your skills, right? I think in the U.S. especially, the studio can be an intimidating place to teach in. Retreats as well, it takes time to get there. Starting in a community space is really a great place to practice teaching and to fine-tune your voice, to find your voice. After about a year of teaching, I sort of journeyed into the studio setting because I think that's a very popular avenue in the West, right, for teachers to make a career in. And I started pretty quickly doing retreats. Now, I was fortunate that I had an event planning background, so that really helped. But I also had a friend and a mentor who encouraged me to try out a weekend retreat and to see if I would like it. And I always offer gratitude to my teachers because I think, well, we have the innate skills within. There's sort of that phrase, we have everything we need within us. There's some logistical things that you really want to know if you're planning a retreat or holding a teacher training or doing a big event, in yoga event in a town. And so I think if you can find a mentor and someone maybe you can shadow or practice karma yoga with, or learn from, continue learning, and always be a student first. If it's wisdom, I don't know, but that's something I impart on new students all the time, is find someone you can spend time with and continue learning from. And 200 hours is so short, right? 250 hours is longer, but still so short. So I think just keeping that student mindset first and find someone or a group of people you can continue learning from. I think the other interesting piece, if you're going to be a yoga teacher in the West, especially in the U.S., is this whole social media, internet world. That I think, while maybe not completely necessary, is a valuable tool if you can figure out a way to use it in a way that's beneficial, especially if you're going to start into leading retreats or open your own studio or do a teacher training. I mean, this is how we find out about things. That's how I found out about Mahadevi. And so I think figuring out a way that you can have a good relationship with social media in the online world as a yoga practitioner, for me at first was difficult, but in the end has been incredibly beneficial to creating my own business.
So then you started also retreats. You take people places. What were your experiences with that?
I really loved it right away. I've always loved to travel, and so they started out as a way to travel, quote unquote, for free, right? How can I see the world and not lose money? And then I started to make a profit on them and realize this could be a really a venture, that would fit my lifestyle and that I wanted to pursue more. Beyond that, beyond the business side, more importantly, I think in our society, we're just go, go, go. This is probably no surprise to anyone interested in yoga practice, but retreats are, the word retreat, right? Retreat from something, retreat inside, retreat somewhere new. They can be so powerful. And a weekend is a short snippet, but oftentimes people who want to try out a longer retreat or travel somewhere else in the world, whether it's with me or somebody else, I usually recommend they try a day-long, maybe a weekend-long retreat first, because it can be very uncomfortable oftentimes to disconnect or to reconnect, as we like to say. And so I've been fortunate that I've sort of created this community, mostly in the U.S., but also Canada, and now branching out more and more. Here we are in Italy, but people I'm meeting who are interested in traveling and learning more about themselves and the practice. And what's important to me always in retreats is the cultural immersion aspect of my retreats. So there are people who will take others, off the beaten path and maybe not experience the local society. But for me, it's really important that we do that and try to support the local economy, especially in countries that are poorer. And so that's a facet of my retreat. While there always is stillness and practice and contemplation, there's also somewhat of this adventurous aspect so that we can really explore, the local culture and really support people who are living in this land on which we get to practice.
So now I could imagine that jumping from like a 75-minute format in a studio into a multi-day retreat can be quite a big step as well. Did you just take it slow and start with one-day retreats and then gradually extend them?
I started with weekend, and I offer several one-day retreats throughout the year in Florida, where I live now. At first it was a lot. At the end of even just a weekend retreat, I was energetically exhausted, and that's a big piece of really learning how many people you can support as one practitioner if you like to partner with people. So that you can have practice as well and not just teaching nonstop for a weekend or a full week. I think that's really important to consider. But then also creating the space somewhere in the middle of the day on these week-long retreats where you can have your own time. So often I'll go for a walk on my own. Often if we go to a different town to explore, I go off on my own just as time for myself, right, to integrate and take care of me so that I can serve others. And so I think that's really important. That's something that I didn't realize at first. And so I think the first year of doing retreats, I got sick at the end of every single one. Yeah, and I was really worn down. And as somebody who's very empathic, I sort of taking on people's stuff, people's junk, and in a week-long retreat, that can be a lot. And so I just had to figure out how to also take care of myself and go back to really the reason why I started this was to hold space for people, to take them around the world and take them inside, but also for myself to travel and continue learning more about me and have my own practice. And so it's finding the balance there, I think, that is really tricky at first.
How did you do this? Like, how did you take care of yourself more? How did you manage to not take on so much from people's stuff and make it sustainable?
Right. Well, I think at first I was excited that so many people wanted to sign up, like, 20 people want to come to my retreat, great, and then think like, whoa, Liz, what's your capacity to take 20 people to Guatemala, for instance, right? And coordinate all those flights and everything, flight times. So it was, first of all, was limiting the size, and I found that really like 10 to 12 is the sweet spot for me. I don't know about for others, but I've also had feedback from other people who've gone on other retreats where there were 25 people on the retreat and they felt as though they didn't get to spend time with the teacher. I think oftentimes we pick a retreat based on location or based on the teacher, right? So if you want to spend time with a teacher and you don't even get to talk to them for more than 30 minutes that whole week, then I think people might be a little disappointed. Beyond that, it was, for me, how much space or how many people fit the space I was able to hold. And I found that 10 to 12 mark was that. So then again, it's just creating space for myself for practice and contemplation and often waking up before everybody else so that I can have my own meditation practice, and then guiding the meditation and holding space space for meditation or creating space when I don't have a broken arm for asana, somewhere in the day. But mostly it's finding quiet time. It's finding space to just separate a little bit from the group, if even just for an hour a day.
And then when we finish the teacher trainings, we always point out how teaching yoga is, of course, such a great way to master it more deeply. Like the old saying goes, if you want to master something, teach it. How was your own experience with that? Did you notice a great impact on your own practice, on your own development through teaching?
Absolutely. Yes. I think I always tell people I learn way more about myself as a yoga teacher than anything else I've ever done. I learn way more about people, but mostly the way I interact with the world, the way I speak, the way I communicate. And then as far as deepening my own yoga practice, for sure. I think I left training feeling, as I mentioned to you before, like, whoa, I don't know anything. And every day I kind of feel that way. I don't really know anything. I'm just learning every single day. But for sure, it became more of this yoga as a way of living, right? Not just this physical aspect that, again, so often I can only really speak to the U.S., but in the U.S. we have a physical practice, and that's where it ends. And I think it was Rod Stryker, the teacher Rod Stryker, who said that, the asana is just the start of putting together the ingredients of a cookie. So you have all these sprinkles, you have the chocolate chips, you have the flour, you have the butter, whatever. And then you put it in the oven, and then when you take it out, that's really when the practice begins. So you have these little ingredients that we're learning, but it's how do you put those together, and then how do you live your yoga once you're kind of, all those ingredients have come together. And so I think for me it's been that, and it's been slowing down my lifestyle and simplifying. I think simplification is just really maybe the number one thing I took away from training, actually, and living in an ashram, and realizing how attached I was to my stuff and how attached I was to the idea of having stuff. And and so more and more I just am doing that, and I think that makes me hopefully a better yoga practitioner and then a better yoga teacher.
Now, along the way, often it goes not just with successes one after the other, but with failures too.
Sure.
Did you have some failures that you learned a lot from that would be worth talking about, perhaps?
Yeah, let me think for a moment. I think actually, yes. So I can speak to this. So actually, for the first couple years after teacher training, I started teaching, I started leading retreats, but I still couldn't support myself financially in that way. So, I don't recommend that anyone leaves teacher training and quits their life right away. I don't know how you feel about that, but, you probably still have bills, and if you went to school in the U.S., you probably have loans and things like that, and responsibilities, and I think, there's finding a balance, but it's also being smart. Okay, I have a car. I have a car payment. I'm going to pay it, and I have a sick old dog, and I have decided that I'm going to take care of my sick old dog, right? So I can't just teach one community class a week with the lifestyle that I had chosen and support myself and support my spouse and my pups, right? So in the first few years, I worked. I was a grant writer. I was a fundraiser, and then I did some social media dabbling, consulting. And it really took me, I think, almost 3 years to where I could really step away from the quote-unquote desk job and live and run my own business and start my LLC and lead several retreats per year, local events. And I think I also had to sort of cultivate this community and, attract the students who liked the way I taught. And so that took some time. And so I say all that because as soon as I quit my, again, quote-unquote last desk job, I overdrafted my bank account twice. I couldn't pay my car bill. And I do have a spouse who works, and that's an economic benefit that I have. But it wasn't so easy. It took time, and it took patience, and I'm not always the most patient person. And just kind of moving slowly and trusting that this was the path and this was my purpose, and I still think I'm figuring it out. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our own experience was different because we did it in a foreign country. Pros and cons to that. Of course, it was quite easy organize things because there was very little paperwork involved. But there was also a big demand because the place was already known for yoga. Do you have a particular experience about the location, or is it rather that yoga is in demand everywhere in the U.S.?
Actually, I think I was fortunate. Yes, I think it's in demand everywhere now in the U.S., but I was fortunate because I am actually from the Northeast, from New Jersey, and yoga was already there and something people were doing and practicing. And when I moved to North Central Florida, there wasn't a lot of yoga. So there were a couple studios, but there's around 100,000 people, give or take. How many students are there? It's a college town. But when I first came out of teacher training, there were a few teachers, but there weren't a ton. And actually in the past couple years since teacher training, it's just exploded. And so I feel very grateful because I feel like I got in at the right time to really start this career. That's not to say that not everyone can do it. I think that if you really, really feel like this is your path and you're dedicated to it, and it takes work. I mean, it takes work, as you know. It's not just showing up and meditating every day if you want to hold space for a lot of people and share this practice with them. And so you have to keep plugging away. And even though every day there's more and more yoga teachers, right? I mean, we now in Gainesville have several teacher trainings where before maybe there was one in Gainesville when I came out of training. Now I think there's maybe 5 or 6 a year. And again, it's 120,000 people, so it's kind of a lot. So I think there's space for all of us. I always think if there wasn't space for all of us, we wouldn't be here right now at this point. And it's certainly finding your voice, but just being patient and trusting that it will unfold. Though I do think it worked out very synchronistically for me to come out of teacher training at that time, right as yoga was sort of booming in Gainesville.
While you're sitting there, perhaps it'd be good if you could give a bit of an impression of what it was like to come here to this totally new place that nobody knows yet.
Well, I think our pizza calls it a fairy forest, and I was very intrigued by that when when we talked about coming here, but now I really see it and feel it, and it feels very magical, and I can't imagine any other space to find inner peace and reconnect to that sense of stillness that's within all of us. And I was a little nervous bringing this group. I know you were. You both were maybe a little nervous too, because I knew that it would be more of a place for contemplation. And depending on where I do retreats, oftentimes they're a little busier. There's maybe more to do, outside of ourselves in the practice. And so I really didn't know what to expect. But arriving, I immediately felt very grounded. I felt very, very calm. Slept great after the jet lag wore off. But the practice space feels like you can just drop in right away. And it's been, a lot of the students who are here with me I've been practicing with for years. And I feel like, we've never created such magic together than in this space, in practice. And, often in studios, people need music and they need certain lighting, and there's all these things that we add to the practice, at least in the States. And here it's sort of a stepping away from that, and again, it's this sort of simplification of, we need to get out of the way and let the practice do the work. And I feel like here you can do that. Good.
Thanks so much for coming. I think.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. It's been wonderful. Good. It's been nice to be in your presence, too.
Likewise.
Yeah.